Good day, everyone. I welcome you. Blair and the group are asking if the slides are online. Okay, they're not there yet. Okay, we'll bring the slides up apparently afterwards. Okay, Blair, Gwen is bringing the slides up on the course site right now, so they should be up there very shortly. So let me begin with the overview. Sander will be the primary presenter today. And we are moving right along here. We are with workshop number 5, and there's really only one more content workshop, which will be next Tuesday. And again, we've been working, we developed the project concept, and now we've been working on a number of different tests, as it were, to prove the potential of the project concept and end up with a prospectus that we'll be presenting. At this point, we have 3 projects that seem to be in some state of working through the prospectus, and I'm going to say a little more at the end today about changing the way in which we're going to do the coaching over these last couple of weeks. And recall that even if we get the prospectus done, there are certainly more things that would have to be achieved moving forward to fully be in a position to launch an innovation project. So, with that setting the stage, Sander, I turn things over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning or good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Glad to see that you've made it online again and are here to join us on this 5th week webinar. And I'm going to talk about moving beyond debate to experimenting in action. Why is that so important? We love to debate, right? Being in meetings, discussion groups, roundtables, panels, it sometimes seems all we do. And still, we at Transform felt that debating was not good enough. This is what you often see. We identify a big issue, a big problem, and our response is, let's hold a meeting, let's analyze it, let's talk about it, let's debate about it. But is having a meeting or doing a debate the most effective way of dealing with that problem, that big evil dragon, whether it's in the room or in your city? We don't think so. But in order to give you a little bit more insight, I'd like to share with you how and when or how and why Transform was founded. Transform was a Dutch innovation program, a public-private partnership, and it ran for 5 years. It ended in 2011, and we were, I can say that I think, quite a unique program. We focused at trying to develop a more sustainable perspective for Dutch agriculture. Before Transform, we had a round table on sustainable agriculture in the Netherlands. It was founded by the Dutch Minister of Agriculture, who said, especially after some very serious incidents in the Netherlands, a lot had to do with intensive livestock farming, avian influenza, foot and mouth disease, a lot of societal unrest about it, but also problems with manure, with the landscape. Our minister said we need a good advice. We need to bring all the bright people together. Let's organize a roundtable and come up with a vision on what sustainable agriculture in the Netherlands would mean. At that round table, we had the brightest of the brightest, but we also had a lot of discussion. We had a lot of debate about definitions, for instance. What precisely is sustainable agriculture, or what is a very sustainable form of the laying hen husbandry in the Netherlands? A lot of debate, a lot of discussion. People were focusing on differences, not on commonalities. It was a polarizing debate. It was the people who were in favor of intensive farming against the people who were in favor of organic farming. And we were only putting more light on the differences instead of looking for bridging opportunities, for commonalities. It was completely science driven. A very important role for the knowledge institutions there, who almost always said, we think we have the answer, or if we do it like this, an industry would follow us, we can solve a lot of issues. And a lot of people said, why is it then that if we have the brightest of the brightest scientists there, so many good knowledge is untouched, is not being used, is not being transformed into innovative practices. So we called it an innovation gap. And all that gave the people at that table and the people around that table and the Dutch Minister of Agriculture the uneasy feeling that we weren't getting anywhere. We were talking, we were reiterating our differences, but we were not moving forward. We were not changing the sustainability trajectory of Dutch agriculture. So how to turn this around? That was the challenge that our minister had, and almost all the other stakeholders. It was a multi-stakeholder roundtable. It was a big challenge, and they didn't have an answer. They did say that we need a bypass. We should stop debating and start doing. Show each other what is possible. Show each other what we mean when we advocate a certain kind of solution, and prove in practice that indeed such a solution would be better than our current practice. We said we are all part of the problem, then we should all be open to being part of the solution. While the reality was that a lot of people were blocking innovations, were blocking different trajectories. They said all existing knowledge is insufficient. If that bright scientific knowledge was so good, it would have been used. So there is a knowledge gap, there's not an innovation gap, and maybe there's something wrong with how we develop our knowledge, how we create our knowledge, and how knowledge development and innovation are seen as two different trajectories, or things that come after each other instead of an intertwined process of knowledge creation and innovation. They said we need a bypass because nobody can do this alone, and we tend to look at the challenge of sustainable agriculture from our own silo, from our own sector, from our own institutional background, but we can't do this alone. And we have to learn our way together to these new solutions. And maybe our current knowledge infrastructure, our current innovation infrastructure is inadequate to facilitate a process like this. So they said maybe we need a new innovation space, and I will follow with a lot of bullets here, so I go through them quickly. This is what people said: a new innovation space where people have the humility to know that they do not have all the answers, where people learn to listen deeply to people with different perspectives and experiences, instead of saying your perspective is far less good than mine, or mine is at least far better than yours. Where people aren't so rushed that they never take time to reflect on what matters most and how things are connected, because we are in a rat race, and we don't look at the assumptions underlying our current practices. An innovation space where great conversations are a normal part of the work instead of just focusing on the daily routines. Where people are constantly learning, evolving, adapting, where the needs of the environment and the community now and in the future are truly balanced with ambitions of economic growth. Think of the 3P I talked about in a previous session. And where people are doing good work, are well connected, well networked, and are learning from the good work and the learning of others, locally, nationally, and globally. Not in a sense of copy-pasting best practices, but really developing new modes, new approaches, new projects together, and where people empower themselves and others to take transformative action. Because if you think back of that presentation, that webinar I gave where I talked about system innovation, we said it is really about transforming our system, and it goes beyond the boundaries of just the project and the ambitions of the project. It really goes to the level of impacting our whole system. This is all quotes from people who said this is what we need, a new innovation space. And I think Transform was such an innovation space, and hopefully the projects that you will be doing in your own city, in your own region, or the program that you're running will also be such a new innovation space, a space where we do not focus on debate but really move towards experimenting in action. So the challenge for Transform was given. He said we need a new vision, a vision that inspires, motivates and challenges us. And the us was seen very broad, all the stakeholders relevant in our metropolitan food system. We need an approach that can deal with the inevitable complexity of that challenge. Because people said as soon as we are identified as a system innovation challenge, we know that it is very complex. Complex because it involves multiple stakeholders. Complex because it involves the now and the future. And it is very dynamic. And complex because we are in a new situation and we can't stick to the old routines. We really have to generate new solutions and learn our way forward. They said we need room to experiment. So this new innovation space should be set up outside the traditional institutional boundaries, because maybe they are blocking real experimentation. Everyone has a vested interest, of course, nothing wrong with that. But in order for experiments to bloom and blossom, we need to organize them outside our standard traditional institutional boundaries. And we need to stimulate deep learning. This is not just about improving yields. This is about changing mindsets, beliefs, values of people. This really is about deep learning. So this is the challenge that Transform was given. Come up with a new perspective for the Dutch aquacultural sector, a more sustainable perspective, and do this in a new innovation space. Organize that space where we can jointly create projects, learning solutions together that really bring that more sustainable perspective of Dutch aquaculture more together. What helped Transform a lot is the work from Peter Senge. And Peter Senge, you might know him from Theory U. He wrote already in 1994 a book about organizational change. And what he said is that there are 3 levels at which we can look at our challenges. First, we can look, of course, at the results we want to achieve. So in terms of sustainable aquaculture, we can we can look at the results, or we can look at our challenge by talking about results that we aspire. Using less manure, being more more friendly with animals, things like that. We can look at our challenge from the perspective of the results we want to achieve. The second level goes a little bit deeper. We can also look at the process that gets us to the results we want to achieve. So we should talk about how we work and how we work together as stakeholders in that food system. And the third is maybe even more difficult. The third level is we can look at our challenges by looking at the assumptions that underlie the way each of us approaches the situation. And then you are at the level of values. And Otto Scharmer and Peter Senge said that in order to really organize change and move from just debating to experimenting in action, you need to organize a triangle. You need to organize an innovation space that has three important foundational pillars. The first is you need a guiding idea. A guiding idea that inspires people, motivates people. And in the Netherlands, we found that the whole notion of metropolitan agriculture, where we see agriculture as an urban function and no longer as a rural function, that guiding idea sparked a lot of energy, a lot of creativity, and a lot of new ideas. So that's the first pillar of the domain of action we wanted to organize. The second pillar was we really need new approaches. We talked about them already in our previous webinars. It's about the multi-stakeholder engagement. It's about action learning. It's about transmissible knowledge creation. So the second pillar is about theory, methods and tools. The third pillar of the domain of action is about innovations in infrastructure, and that goes back to what I said before, that maybe our current system is not well enough equipped to deal with the challenges, especially the challenges that lie in the middle of our different institutions. So this idea of Peter Senge helped us in identifying what should we as Transform work on. We should work on guiding ideas, metropolitan agriculture, but also much more specific in projects like the Round Deal system. We should work at a hen house that is designed from the perspective of the chicken. We should work on theory, methods and tools. To come up with new approaches on how we work together as different stakeholders, how we learn, how we conversate with each other, how we listen. And we should work on identifying what kind of conditions are needed, infrastructural conditions, but also rules and regulations, our orgware, to support these kind of things. And all of this made it was critical for us to really move to that level of experimenting in action. Of course, what we really wanted to do is organize that deep learning cycle. Organize. I'm going to answer your question in a moment, Renee. Organize a deep learning cycle in all of the stakeholders and with all of the stakeholders. But it's difficult to find a knob to turn on if you want to have somebody learn, because it is about awareness and sensibilities. It's about attitudes and beliefs and skills and capabilities. And we felt that the best way to organize that learning is to have people work in that domain of action and really participate and engage with each other. That is the best way to organize that deep learning cycle. It's the experiences in that domain of action that will help people change their attitudes and beliefs, because they see that something else is different, or they will learn new skills. They will learn how to work with those stakeholders that they normally saw as their adversaries and now turn out to be unlikely allies. So Renee is asking, repeat the first aspect of Senji's model for change. And the first aspect, I think you mean, Renee, is the guiding ideas. That's the content part. That's the vision that inspires us, motivates us, challenges us, and that is what all the stakeholders should have in common. Even though there is, of course, room for very different perspectives within that guiding idea. The perspective of metropolitan aquaculture is a broad perspective. It's a broad lens of looking at your context. And now Renee is saying, no, what you said before, process and underlying assumptions. Sorry, Renee, I don't know what you said. Oh, you mean the 3 levels. I said about that Theory U says there are 3 different levels of looking at our challenges. The first one is looking at the results we want to achieve. So that's also content driven, saying we should have a more profitable, less energy consuming, better fitted into our landscape, those type of results. The second level is looking at the process that gets us to the results we want to achieve. So how do we work as individuals? How do we work together? How do we organize our business? That's process related. And the third level, the deepest level, is looking at the assumptions that underlie the way each of us approaches the situation. Because when you're able to move those assumptions, including the values that go with those assumptions, if you are able to change that a little bit, then you can really organize creativity, and people will start thinking, dialoguing, but also acting differently. So this is what Transform focused on, and maybe this is a bit too much detail, but I still wanted to share it with you because this was sort of the mindset that Transform used, and in the mindset of Transform, it's really that when groups learn to operate from a real emergent possibility, so thinking about a real guiding idea made concrete in a project, they begin to tap into a different social field that manifests to an altered quality of thinking, conversing, and collective action. And this leads to collective problem definition, shared reflection, and a commitment to deeper understanding in which everyone has part of the puzzle. And that is what we wanted in Transform. And in this way, the next practice platforms, where I talked about in session 2, are emerging, where business development is combined with transdisciplinary knowledge creation, interactive policy making, and active community engagement. This is what really means that businesses, governments, societal community organizations, and multiple scientific and knowledge disciplines are equally needed in this. And I can't stress that enough. It's about equal engagement and no one in the lead. And we have learned that in order to break out of the patterns that shape our current aquaculture and food system, the crux is to effectively bring these diverse stakeholders together and spur collective learning, action, experimentation, and innovation. But that really requires a different kind of process, as I already talked about. Because what you normally see is that when we have a challenge and we start moving to action, we tend to react immediately to the challenge, and we come up with quick fixes. It's sort of our standard routine. It's very human to do so. Give us a challenge and we're going to solve it. And the result is a quick fix. And sometimes quick fixes is just what you need. When you have a very actual problem that can't deal with anything, that we can't wait to solve, we have to have a quick fix. But we also know that a quick fix is based on the knowledge we have, the experiments we did before. It's all based on what we already know. sometimes a quick fix doesn't really, or maybe not sometimes, most often a quick fix doesn't really solve the problem on a deeper level. A quick fix is never about redesign, so it doesn't change us the way we work together. It doesn't change our process. We need to go deeper into our understanding to come to a level of redesigning, of changing policies, of changing process and structure. And sometimes that is enough to come up with a different solution. Sometimes it's necessary to go even one step deeper into the challenge and really start reframing the whole problem, saying if we should look at this challenge from a somewhat different perspective, using a few other values and setting away some of our beliefs, we might be able to reframe the challenge and come up with a different kind of solution. A solution that's probably much more robust and much more system changing. But the really deepest level of solving a problem or dealing with a challenge is when you are able to come to that level of inspiration, of motivation, where people are letting go of all their previous learning and really start being creative, start learning together and start innovating together. And especially for the challenges that we're dealing with, sustainability challenges, system challenges, the belief in Transform was we need to get to that deep level of generative dialogue, of creativity and innovation in order to not do things a little bit better, but to really do better things. That requires a different mode of listening and talking to each other. And some of you might know this slide. It's also from Theory U, and I've used it also at the Novi workshop, for instance, in Detroit. And we at Transform really think that the way we talk and the way we listen to each other is very critical in the process of innovating together, and it's very critical to prevent us from staying on that level of debating and really move toward experimenting in action. Because what we normally do when we hear someone talk, or when I'm talking, I am downloading right now. I am telling you everything I know about Transform and how we moved from debate to experimenting in action. And probably you are sitting behind your computer and you're listening to me, you're downloading my information, and part of what you hear will probably stick, and the rest will go away through your other ear, and it's gone. So we are only talking about our existing realities. We're not building anything together. We're not even debating. There's very little debate. We only have our chat box. If we would have a more physical meeting now, and we would have a much more opportunity of interaction, we might end up in a debate where I'm saying something that you don't agree with, and your immediate response is saying, "Hey, Sander, it's nice of you to say it, but I have a completely different experience, and I think that in reality it's like this." Or we should have a debate saying, "Hey, but what do you precisely mean with sustainable development, and what's your definition of sustainable development?" I have a different definition of sustainable development, and I think mine is better. Then we are clashing our ideas. We start debating, and inevitably we are judging each other. You are judging what I am saying, and I'm judging what you are saying. It's not a very constructive way of finding a common ground. It's not a very constructive way of looking for possibilities that we can build together. So it's not a real dialogue. There's no self-reflectivity in there. There's little empathy in there. We have to redirect our energy in a way of to really have that start having that dialogue. And it also means that we have to start not listening with your mind and with your head, but talking and listening from your heart. What do you believe in? What scares you? What are the things that you lie awake from at night? And when we are able to let go of all the things we've learned before, then there is this opportunity of generating new ideas together, and being open to what others are saying, being open to the ideas of others, even if you don't like them immediately. There is this quality in trying to understand why it is that others think that this might be an interesting solution. And when you start building on those values, and the other people you're having that conversation with, that dialogue with, are behaving in the same manner, then you can start building something. So in the experience of Transform, the way we listened and the way we are talking to each other is critical in preventing that we stick in that downloading or debating mode. And dialogue is is what we at least need to come up with different solutions. But what we really want to spur is creativity, a generative dialogue where we don't just understand each other, but use that understanding, use that learning to co-create the new knowledge and co-create the new ideas that will help us deal with the challenge much better. This of course also requires new innovation management, and Transform we were a program, we were a private foundation, and we had to manage our program, because maybe when you say this, when I'm saying this, it gives you the impression that we had a lot of dialogues at Transform, but actually we did have quite a structured process, at times maybe too structured. We had some learning to do in that sense too, and we behaved much different at the end of our program than in the beginning. But we really practiced innovation management, and as this cartoon says, it's really about completely living, of walking the talk. You can't just put a banner on front of your castle saying we welcome your ideas, when there's so much behavior around it that illustrates that in effect you're not at all welcoming any ideas. So we try to walk the talk. We try to have a new kind of innovation management, both on a project level as on a program level, and I want to share both of them with you. Our innovation management on project level, when we are looking back now at how we did this, we were able to identify a 5-step approach, and I'm saying this because when we were working at Transform, we didn't explicitly use that 5-step approach. We were learning on the fly. We were learning while doing. And only now, a few years after Transform, we are able to look back and say, hey, but this is the approach we followed. But it was an approach that emerged from our practices. It emerged from the learnings in our program. And it was also a dynamic approach. And as I said before, Transform behaved much different at the end of its program than in the first beginning. But the key is that our innovation management, the innovation management that we practice, really changed the traditional project-based innovation management approach to a process-oriented innovation management. I said before in another webinar that we used to talk about Transform as an expedition, and a learning journey where we had an ambition, but we didn't know the route to achieve it, and we were really learning while doing. That really was the case at Transform. It was very process oriented, and we had a big problem with all the institutions around us, many of which who were on our board or were funding us, who said, come on, guys, you can't follow a complete process-oriented innovation management. We have to find measures and routines, and we want to have checks and balances in there to see whether you're doing the right thing with our money, for instance. So there was really a clash between that new innovation space that Transform was and the traditional institutional settings around there. And the other critical element, and Chris will talk a lot about it in webinar 6, is monitoring and reflection. And we mentioned it before in almost all of our webinars. Monitoring and reflection, you could say that was part of our innovation management. It was a critical support function, to safeguard that innovation process, to safeguard that when we did things in a more traditional project management mode, because we had to, because our funders asked us to, it didn't block or frustrate our innovation process. But it also meant that monitoring and reflection was used to not only focus on did we achieve those results, remember that first level of theory U, but also focused on the other levels, the levels of the process and the levels of the underlying assumptions. So Renee is asking, how did the funding institutions shift during the process in terms of how they met their needs in this new way? Well, Renee, it was a constant battle, to be honest. While they understood what we were saying, they just had a big problem with fitting that into their routines. So we were successful in trying to postpone judgment in a way, and that is what we asked for, actually. Come on, guys, we know that this doesn't fit with your routines, but give us the chance to show that we are able to create results that matter to you too, and results that will make you happy, even though we can't fit them into your tables and forms. And for a few years that worked, especially because we had some very good personal relationships with some of the people responsible for it. Our minister, the Minister of Agriculture, and some of the lead CEOs of agribusiness firms that we work with really gave us enough trust and enough room to experiment in that way, to do it like that. And after Transform and those funding agencies also acknowledged that we were maybe even more successful than similar programs who had a much more traditional project-based innovation management. But still they were unable to change their routines. So while we proved that it was different, was possible to do it differently, we didn't change that part of our system. So I'm going to talk now about those 5 steps that we used on a project level, and some of you might have heard me say this often and talk about this 5-step innovation management before. The first step on a project level that we always tried to do in our innovation management was identifying the common triple P challenges. And I see that Renee is asking another question. So the reputation and capital of the champion was key in getting them to suspend judgment and agree to move forward. Yes, you're absolutely right, Renee. Back to step 1. Identifying common triple P challenges. And I think I talked about it in the webinar about triple P value propositions. When you want to build a value proposition that incorporates all 3 P's, you of course have to start with identifying the challenges that your stakeholders in your broader network see that are attached to your ID. There is a real critical element here again for talking and listening, because what we normally do is we send out what we feel are the most important challenges, And every stakeholder does that. We are downloading, and the first step is then to prevent to stay with just that downloading and debating, because then we are only exchanging our ideas and we're not building something that we have in common. We are not building a joint ambition. So the first step is from I to we, and critical there is that the different stakeholders in our projects really recognized that there are different perspectives and that those different perspectives mattered too, were also relevant to the ambition that we had, and that's a very important first step. Do you recognize that there are different perspectives and that those perspectives matter too? Of course, there is this other question: that is there a need to collaborate with others to identify all the perspectives? A lot of people, especially scientists, for instance, say, "No, we don't have to collaborate with others. We can just analyze it. It's just a mapping exercise. We can do that, and then we know it, and then we can build further on that." But there is much more quality in the process if you don't do the analysis yourself, but if you do the analysis together, then you are working on a first step of learning, and then the group identifies what is common instead of an expert, and then the group is also really forming into a team that has this common challenge. So the first step in our innovation management was really to focus on this process from I to we, both in terms of group formation, team formation, but also in terms of the common objectives, the joint challenge, the joint ambition. Step 2 was then to, and somehow the pictures here are missing in this slide, sorry for that. Step 2 was to identify a promising coalition. When you see what other values the other stakeholders in your project have, that is not enough. We have to work together, and we have to see that there is that even in a value conflict, there is a value in there. There is the value conflict might lead to a different level of learning. So resistance is not something that you should scare away from. Resistance is maybe something that you should actively look for, because that is where values differ most. There's maybe also the biggest room to create change. But it requires that you are willing to translate judgments into constructive contributions to a collaborative process. Are you willing to do this? That's also a very personal question. And our monitoring and reflection focused on questions like this. Because when you are able to transform potential resistance, potential value conflicts into design criteria, saying, okay, if we are going to work together on this project, then this is the set of design criteria that we should all work with. Then you have sort of established some rules of engagement on a content level. This is what we should be working on. This is a design criteria for our coalition. But it also means that only the people who are willing to do this, that really recognize that value of resistance, don't scare away from it, and that the people that are willing to translate their judgment into constructive contributions are the right people to have in your coalition. So people who live for getting conflicts on the table, and who are only advocating their own values and their own beliefs and are unable to translate it into design criteria, are unable to translate it into constructive contributions, only and don't see the value of other perspectives, those people are not the right people to have in your coalition. And in many cases, the Transform projects, the coalition what changed over time, because while the process continued, some stakeholders found out that they couldn't let go of their judgment, or they weren't able to translate their judgment into constructive contribution. Sometimes had to do with trust in the other stakeholder, sometimes had to do with the incentives in their own institution that they had to adhere to, and it made it very difficult for them to be in a process like this, to be in this new innovation space, to really experiment in action instead of trying to figure things out at the start and show a real completely fleshed out project proposal and say this is precisely what we're going to do. There's no risk involved. No, there is a lot of risk involved. It's a challenging process, so it requires the right people in your coalition. But just identifying who could be in your coalition is not enough. You have to forge that coalition to really work together. You should look at the new connections between those different stakeholders. Are they really leading to new opportunities? Can we connect values and in such a way that they contribute to a more sustainable performance of our project? That requires also to see through the eyes of others. We did that, for instance, by doing a lot of learning journeys together. We didn't set people around the table and just had them in a conference room sharing information, building ideas, stacking things on top of each other, or designing it with a blank sheet of paper. We really took people out of their office spaces, out of their workspace, and put them in we put them in the shoes of their fellow teammates, the other stakeholders. So they had meetings at the farm, but also in the factory where meat was processed, or they went to the ministry to meet with colleagues of people, or even have a discussion with the minister himself. We were helping people really see through the eyes of others, but also experience what it was to be in someone else's shoes. So Renee is asking, did you communicate overtly about the right people for this work? I mean, say it like you are saying to us. How did people respond to that, particularly those who didn't fit and opted out, or were advised that it was not a fit? Well, we were quite explicit that being in the processes that Transform supported and being in the projects that Transform invested in required something else from people, that it was not a traditional process. We were quite explicit about it, and we also made it clear from the start to people that saying, if you are feeling uncomfortable with that, if somehow either you as a person, based on your own character, or you as in your job can't deal with it, let us know, because that is this. We think that we need to work together differently. But if you can't do it, let us know. We can then try to find a solution, because this again will help us understand better what works and what doesn't work, and why it doesn't work, and maybe we can find solutions then. Or we could say, well, then too bad, we have to say goodbye. So we were very overt in saying that we needed special people, that it required special skills. That made it also interesting for people to participate in some of our projects. Everybody wants to be special. but it also meant that in many of the projects, individuals said goodbye and new individuals were introduced. And John is asking, Sander, when coalition members leave the coalition for whatever reason, can they later return? Yes, they can later return. Did this happen with Transform Experience? That is, can the coalition be seen as a fluid environment where coalitions may come and go as conditions warrant? Yes, to a certain extent. What you of course try to do is organize a collective learning process. And someone who is not part of that process for whatever reason, that makes it very difficult to get back in. If you step out of the process, if you are not part of that collective learning or part of that collective learning process, then you will most certainly miss a lot of information, a lot of new knowledge that was built into that group. And of course, we were able to have new stakeholders join in. For instance, when we identified that we were just missing a stakeholder in our process, a key stakeholder. And in almost all the cases where that happened, we were able to introduce that new stakeholder. But leaving a process also does something with the trust. You say that you don't trust that process enough to stay in, or that your company doesn't trust the process enough to stay in. And it also means that the rest of the group will most likely trust you a little bit less, especially when you rejoin again. So it is possible, and it happens. And it happened, for instance, with a project where where an individual left the project because his company didn't want to support it anymore, because they felt it was really not in their interest to continue to stay on board. But that individual felt that that project might be very interesting to him, and then when that individual had another job 2 months later with another company, he persuaded that company to join the project, and he again returned into the project team. In a mode like this, then it happened. And Renee, yes, you're right, it is the coalition of the willing, and Catherine, you're absolutely right. That's what I was just saying. Leaving the process indicates a lack of trust. You have revolved when you return. Yeah, you're right. So our step 3, forging the coalitions, we really invested, so that's the new innovation management, in relationships, in learning from each other, from each other's institutional reality, and of course we also focused on, do we have shared ideas then that can turn opportunities into reality? Do these new connections really lead to identifying new opportunities? That too proved that this is the right coalition. As I said, if we said that for this ambition we need something else, we need to broaden our coalition because we're missing critical stakeholders, and without these critical stakeholders we can't turn our opportunity into a reality, then that is precisely what happened. When the coalition was established, was forged, we focused on collaborative redesign. We really said, as Chris indicated in his webinar, on creating new knowledge, and that is everyone brings his knowledge with him, but we also know that all the knowledge we have is insufficient. We have to combine it, and we have to learn together based on all that knowledge to be able to create something new together. It also meant that we were not just tweaking things a little bit. We were really redesigning from scratch. We were trying to get to that level of assumptions, of values, and go from there in building our ID. it also meant that we looked very critical at are the triple P values that we put central in our value proposition, are they really connected to stakeholder incentives? Is it not something that is only at the fringe of their activities? Are they not just here to prevent problems for their current business, so they're not here for a risk management from a risk management perspective, or are they just here for some what I called corporate social responsibility, not really connected to the true incentives in your institution? And the other critical question is, does that new business case that we're building then, does that really inspire investments? Investments, as I said in the webinar on triple P value propositions, investments in the currencies of all those different stakeholders. Investments in money by business, investments in by changing policies, rules and regulations by government, investments in reputation by NGOs, or investments in scientific grounding by academics. And Gwen is going to show the PDF so we can see my images. And Gwen is quickly scrolling to them. And you can download this PDF, of course, from our website, and then you can see it. So this was a picture from I to we, where you move the arrows going inward instead of downloading and debating. This is to see the value of resistance. It's not fight or flight. It is evaluate and connect. That is the value of resistance. Forging coalitions has to do with experiencing, with learning, and a lot of questions being asked, and then you're able to identify those shared ambitions. Collaborative redesign has a lot to do with co-creation, so we use design workshops, testing, all kind of tools like that. Our triple P scan, the assessment that I talked about in the webinar on triple P value propositions, also helped to do these kinds of redesign. And then step 5 is, of course, keep learning and improving. Our whole innovation management was not focusing on identifying victory quickly and saying, oh, we've realized the result, namely we have a much more sustainable egg. No, especially because we were in it for system innovation, we said there's always reason to keep learning and keep improving. And when I shared with you the example of Rondeal, I also indicated that the first Rondeal changes dramatically from the last Rondeal being built, because Rondeal is still in that process of developing and innovating, and they do it via this Kenji approach. The 4 stakeholders, the knowledge institutions, the entrepreneurs, the NGOs, and the governmental units, working together on innovation. And a critical test is there, of course, if those 4 stakeholders are really still in it. And they are still in it when knowledge institutions are improving their reputation. If they are, if the articles and reports and books they're writing about that project helps them improve their reputation. That entrepreneurs are still in it because this project helps them realize continuity, and profit was a means to an end, as I said in my first webinar. That it helps NGOs get more respect on that societal agenda, like that Society for the Protection of Animals in the Netherlands that said we are really connected to that Rondeal project, because with this project we can show that it is possible to perform much more sustainable in this sector. And governments are very willing to keep learning and improving as long as it attains their political goals. So that was, those 5 steps are the way how we describe what we focused on as Transform. That is in addition, of course, to all the standard business development that took place in each of the projects. So this was really the add-on on the project level that Transform supported. And I think this add-on is critical for that moving to experimenting in action, and moving to experimenting in action on a different level, not just going to quick fixes, but by organizing a generative dialogue between all these different stakeholders, trying to spark creativity and start innovating from that foundational work. Of course, you can also look at not at the project level, but at the program level. And we used a theory from Cutter. He wrote in Harvard Business Review a piece on the 8 accelerators of change, and they remarkably resemble what we did as Transform as a program. And I'm gonna walk with you through these 8 accelerators of change. The first and centerpiece of organizing change is to create a sense of urgency around a single big opportunity, and it resembles a lot that guiding idea that Senji and Otto Scharmer talk about when they talk about Theory U, creating a sense of urgency around a single big opportunity. For Transform, that was the idea of metropolitan aquaculture. Agriculture as an urban function, and we were able to create that sense of urgency, but it's not a one-time trick. It is something you have to constantly do. You have to keep that sense of urgency also to have people stay committed and involved. Then the second step, upper right, is build and maintain a guiding coalition. Also on a program level, we had a guiding coalition. We had representatives of the most important stakeholders in our board and in our advisory councils. Because we said this can never be something just from us. It has to be something that is co-owned, where people really feel ownership and commitment, other stakeholders too. Otherwise we will be isolated and our impact will be very, very low. Maintaining that guiding coalition was equally important as building it again. So that was a critical second element. The third element is formulate a strategic vision and develop change initiatives designed to capitalize on the big opportunity. That is, of course, how we translated our vision of metropolitan aquaculture into much more tangible project ideas. And that too made it much more visible for people, that metropolitan aquaculture is not just a nice story. It is something that we can capitalize on, that we can envision how projects would look like and how this would change our current practices. Of course, we communicated the vision and the strategy to create buy-in and attract a growing volunteer army, but communication is here explicitly meant as two-way interaction. This is about dialogue. This is not about marketing and sales. Creating buy-in is only gonna happen when people feel that your vision is their vision, and that will only happen if they are involved in building that vision. Fifth element, to accelerate movement towards the vision and opportunity by ensuring that the network removes barriers. Well, that again is one of the reasons why we felt that guiding coalition was so critically important. We said if we want to have an impact on a system level, if we want system change to occur, then inevitably we will bump into barriers that are the reason why we are not happy enough with our current system, and we have to remove those barriers. But probably we as a program, we as a group of people are not equipped well enough to remove those barriers. We need really our other stakeholders, our other friends. And I see that James is typing in, with all of the stakeholder perspectives, isn't creative tension to create innovation important to developing a coalition that's shared focus and build successful? Yes, James, you're absolutely right. So when I talked about creating that vision and strategy, that is what happened there. Of course, there was creative tension. That's the value of resistance that made it possible for us to really strengthen our vision. And we did that by incorporating the values of people who've said, well, maybe this isn't what I meant precisely. And because we were in such a generative dialogue with those people, I think the vision strengthened and deepened. Sixth accelerator of change, celebrate visible, significant short-term wins. We did that with Transform. Of course we did that. We did that because people wanted to see that, yes, we are making progress, even though our ambition is an ambition that lies far away in the future, and we can't completely assess our impact. And precisely therefore it was so critically important to also celebrate the small steps that we made, and saying, even though we're far from what we really want in the end, this was an important step, and thank you for contributing to this step. That seventh accelerator of change, never let up, keep learning from experience, don't declare victory too soon. That is that links very well with that fifth step on the project level. Also, as Transform on a program level, we were never satisfied with where we were. We celebrated the short-term win, but we also said, this isn't where the story ends. We want to keep learning. We want to know what you don't like about where we are right now, and we want to keep working with you to improve that further. And of course, the eighth accelerator of change is trying to institutionalize strategic changes in the culture. In the culture as a group for Transform, but also in the culture of each of the standing organizations, each of the stakeholders that were involved in Transform. And that is why we involved them as a guiding coalition, as a in our board and our councils, because we said that you are change agents too. Change agents in your own organization. When you are not in Transform but in your own organization, you take with you all the learnings from Transform, and you are the one who can bring the change further in your own culture. So these 8 accelerators of change is what we used at Transform on a program level, and of course they resemble very much the 5 steps on a project level. But there is a difference between these, and I can't show you this one. This had to do with those 5 stages of these 8 stages of transformation that I just talked about, but also the pitfalls that go with those. But somehow this slide is not showing well. So hopefully we will be able to make it visible for you in the version that we are putting on the website. I'm going to skip this one now. So what I hope to have shared with you today is that moving from debate to experimenting in action means practicing innovation management on 3 levels. On the level of vision, that guiding ID, creating a joint sense of urgency, talking about those triple P value propositions. We focused our innovation management on that. But we also focused our innovation management on the approach, on multi-stakeholder engagement, on the quality and the type of dialogue we were having, on action learning, on new knowledge co-creation. And we were very, very different from all the other innovation programs that run in the Netherlands, especially on the level of that approach. And Transform itself was the room to experiment. We were a change in innovation infrastructure, but we constantly had to safeguard that room to experiment, like I shared with you with our funding agencies and like the people who we had to be accountable to. safeguarding that innovation structure was something that we constantly needed to do. And when Transform became more successful, some of our stakeholders felt that Transform was becoming a real threat, because we showed that a different approach sometimes was more effective than more traditional approaches, like long-term knowledge programs. One of the presidents of one of the Dutch universities actually stepped out of the board of Transform when this happened, when he saw that we were successful in creating a new innovation infrastructure, and he thought that, hey, you're becoming a threat to me, because when more money would go to initiatives like Transform, he, with his university might get less money. So again, we had to safeguard that room to experiment. I hope I've shared with you why debating, roundtables, panels, fora, all those kind of activities are not enough when it comes to innovation. That we can never create innovation on paper. While it's so important to engage with all these stakeholders and really organize a generative dialogue, get to that deeper level of understanding, that deeper level of learning, where we let go of all the old assumptions, and where we are able to really start redesigning, reframing, and regenerating our whole challenge. That is why Transform felt that it was so critical to experimenting in action. And because we knew that we couldn't flesh out from the start what we would learn in this trajectory, we also said we are not going to do it. We are going to have that process have its flow. And in terms of innovation management, that's a strange thing to do. Because we tend to use our tools and methods to get grip on the process and to steer the process. And that's not what we did with our innovation management. We tried with our innovation management to only support the flow that the process created, instead of damming it in or trying to steer it. That is what made us unique, but that is also why I am convinced that we were able to create the innovative results that we did, with a different process, with a different kind of innovation management, let alone by sitting at a round table. We would never have created these kinds of results. So what I'm hoping is that this has inspired you about how you will go about with your project, how you are going to work on vision, on the approach, and about the room to experiment needed for your project to bloom and blossom. And you're welcome, Renee. I love downloading. That's my pitfall. So this is hopefully my lesson of today.
Thank you,
I'm going to share with you the assignment for week 5, but I think
we
Chris,
apologize for everyone. We have those of us who are behind the scenes trying to figure out the technical glitches in these slides. We really have no idea why we were having trouble, but for the most part, when we finally figured out to switch to the PDF, that helped us. But thank you, Sander. Great job. And Sander's not going to go away. He's here to answer questions. And so as I go through these next couple of slides, be thinking about formulating your questions on today's material. But again, picking up the assignment how do you propose to move from debate to action? What actions are needed to move your project to implementation? How will you create the space to experiment? And I think Sander gave a lot of different ideas. And then how will you use experiments and action to resolve factual conflicts and distrust? And how can you formulate a series of actions to de-risk your idea's implementation? And again, at this prospectus level that we're dealing at the moment, we don't want sort of volumes, but we want you to be able to look at these questions and begin to think about can your concept be translated into action, and what are going to be some of the critical things that you're going to need to do as you begin to think about translating your ideas into the real work that will come. Looking ahead to next week, the last content workshop is on monitoring and reflecting to learn, and I will be the primary speaker next week, and that will essentially end the series on the various tests that you bring to your concept to prove its potential to move on to the feasibility phase and full proposal phase. This is, I guess, an administrative announcement. We're really going to change the approach to coaching at this point. The last 2 Thursdays, we have essentially had very few participants in the coaching session. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to discontinue the sort of general coaching session. And instead, for those of you who are working on individual projects, if you would contact Sander or me directly to pick a time, and we're suggesting probably by phone or by Skype. In the case of our teams in Detroit, it's going to be fairly easy to reach me by phone. More difficult in the case of some of our other teams. But the point is, Sander and I will still keep the Thursday 8 to 10 a.m. available, but in essence, we would really like you to approach us either on the course site itself or by direct email to request a time and a process for coaching. And we can also make other times available as needed for the groups. But I think the formal coaching session open sort of to everyone has, I don't know whether it hasn't worked well, or the fact is, and I think Sandra and I are both aware, we have certainly covered an immense amount of material over the 5 workshops, and there's one more workshop where we're going to be providing some other things, and it may be just absorbing all of this becomes a real challenge at the speed at which we have been going. But in any event, we're going to shift from general coaching to the different projects, and there are only really about 3 or 4 projects that are really been working out there, and so again we think we might as well just spend the time going having each project directly interact with us at this point forward. So, with that in mind, questions and comments for Sander on today's workshop material. And then again, a reminder that this week's assignment would normally be due on Monday. Most groups have not been doing assignments and posting, and so again, we're going to try and make a more individual approach to the projects. But any questions or comments on today's material? Thank you, Renee. Well, not seeing any
And thank you, Mentor.
questions. I think that we will probably adjourn for a day, and again, to each of the project groups, please be in touch directly with us, and we'll set up a time for more individual feedback and coaching. With that, thank you all, and we will adjourn today's session.